The margin for error for Michigan against Ohio State is going to be slim. But can it be done? There's a lot of people out there that make it sound like it can't be. I'm going to tell you why Michigan can beat Ohio State in this preview episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thanksgiving. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hull, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Thank you to all of our everydayers out there, and thank you for making us your first listen. Appreciate you joining us, whether it's Thanksgiving Day or after. We are not doing the manifesto today. The plan is to do that tomorrow. So today we are going to go full preview of Michigan, Ohio State, my thoughts, my final prediction, all of that kind of stuff. Kind of funny because I haven't really fully wrapped my head around this game, as is kind of generally the case every single year. I want to start off with some kind of intangibles. We'll get into some interesting stats and things of that nature, and then we'll get to the final prediction. That's the plan. But I think it's really interesting going into this week, or just happening this week. To me, there's a lot of things that stand out in terms of demeanor, behavior, all that kind of stuff, right? So I think it's funny because I feel like it stems from the top down, that there is a hubris coming out of Columbus. If you were to listen to anything Ryan Day has said all week, you would think that Ohio State has won the last four and not Michigan. If you listen to any of their media or their players, you would think that Ohio State was the one who's won the last four and not Michigan. There seems to be very little due respect here, and just this kind of, I understand going into a game believing you can and you will win, but I think that rivalries like this deserve a little bit more respect. And I think you look back at how Michigan treated the rivalry in the first, 5 years of Jim Harbaugh compared to the final three, as well as this last year. And it's Ohio State is talking an awful lot like those Jim Harbaugh Michigan teams. It was not this like Jim Harbaugh himself might have been a little bit more like, yeah, we're going to have to play good, that type of thing. But like the players themselves were out there saying things that were very much more in line of what you would hope to say if you are in a situation where it's like, hey, man, we haven't won a game against these guys since 2011. We got to figure it out. Whereas Jeremiah Smith, for instance, who went over the summer and said that he guaranteed a win the next 2 years, this year and next year against Michigan, says that nothing about their defense this week, he said on the Caleb Downs and Josh Downs podcast, nothing about their defense stands out about Michigan's defense. That's kind of interesting. It's the toughest defense they'll have faced all year. I understand if you're looking at the corner specifically, I could see where maybe he feels that way. But still, it's not something that I feel like you should say. And I think that you should be giving a team like Michigan, if you're in Ohio State's position, utmost respect. And you kind of see that from Michigan, right? Outside of Jordan Marshall asked about why he chose Michigan. And I mean, this is not like about the team and the schematics and like the challenges that come up here. It was more about like, why did I pick Michigan? Well, because of the people. I thought, I felt like it was, this was the people that I wanted to be around. And I didn't really like the people in Ohio. So, I mean, that's a little inflammatory, but it's kind of program to program rather than, the things that happen on the field. Ultimately, none of that truly matters, but I think it's indicative of a mindset. And it's the same mindset, it's that Ohio State has had each of the 4 years of we show up, you bow down. This is our birthright. This is the year, right? Like there's the reason why you see a lot of the Ohio State media, like, and even the national media, no one giving Michigan a chance whatsoever to win this game, really. No one. Outside of Josh Pate, who has learned his lesson, and maybe that ends up snake biting Michigan. I don't know. But ultimately, you don't see anyone really choosing Michigan. And as much as you can say none of that matters, when you mix the outside expectations with the inside expectations, with a sense of hubris, with a sense of like, you know, Jeremiah Smith saying nothing about these guys stands out. And I know he's just one guy, but then you don't have the proper respect for your opponent to take them as seriously. So if you do get punched in the mouth, then what are we talking about here? Right. So there's that. Now I want to expound on, before we get into stats and stuff too. Well, I also want to add, before we get to that, Ryan Day with the, hey, we're going to fly this year instead of taking the bus. And Michigan flies down there every year, I think. But Ohio State doesn't. And he's like, yeah, we're just going to stick to the routine. Maybe that's something that changes, but it really does feel like that's grasping at straws, right? That feels like Michigan's in your head. Will it work? I mean, I'm not saying none of these things won't work, right? I'm not saying that. Ohio State is an extremely talented team. But Ohio State has had an extremely talented team each of the last 4 years. And if I was to look at and say, like, where's Michigan's defense versus their offense? Because everyone's just kind of expecting that the Ohio State defense is going to essentially easily hold Michigan's offense, at least the passing game. And that, which is, it's possible. It's certainly possible. And on the other side, just say, okay, they're just going to pass all over Michigan. And the question is, can they run the ball? And, all of that kind of stuff. So, it's funny because each of the last 4 years, like I said last year, I would have taken in the game, I would have taken the 2021 iteration of Ohio State, which, CJ Stroud had almost 400 yards passing in that game. I would have taken that offense versus the offense that Ohio State had last year. And Ohio State fans, they came after the show. And I mean, yeah, you won the national championship, but as far as the game is concerned, it ended up being correct. I would still hold to that. Now, I would even say, like, if in this game, I think that I would prefer to have Julian Sayin over Will Howard, but at the same time, and probably Kyle McCord as well. But I think I would still rather have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka. I think maybe Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka is a little bit of a wash compared to Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. But I would still I would rather have the Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba of 2021 than what they have now. That's just me. That doesn't mean that I'm right? Like, they might go off. Because we've seen Michigan struggle against the pass here and there. This is not like some lockdown, like, the teams are not passing the way they normally would. And generally they are, but they're not rushing the way that they normally would. So that's going to be an interesting kind of battle. Defensively, it's kind of hard to say because, yeah, it looks generational. It looks great. They haven't played, as we kind of highlighted earlier in the week, they haven't played any top tier offenses really. And, well, last year they as much as you kind of act like, yeah, their defense really kind of fell apart. Like, it didn't. The defense was the great part of that team. Michigan still won. They still found a way to win. Michigan, there's some revisionist history. This isn't a shot at anybody, but there's some revisionist history. And it goes beyond what I said yesterday on the show about Steve Dace's comments. But I've seen multiple shows in the last 24 to 48 hours that have said, like, yeah, it was an obvious advantage that the Michigan defensive line versus the Ohio State front, and like that was obviously going to win. Yeah, the Michigan defensive line. And that was not the case. Everyone was talking about how, Ohio State's, got maybe the best offensive line in the country. They're just so much better. They fixed the glitch, all that kind of stuff. And then Michigan's defensive front ended up dominating. And I understand Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, but there is that. And I do think that to that point, it's going to be interesting to see some of the battles that go within. So let's get more into some of the stats, some of the battles and all of that kind of stuff and some of my thoughts there. And let's do that here in just a moment. But before we do, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel They've got live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a bigger payout. It keeps every single game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I really wish there was a way, actually there is a way. I don't have a guest. I can mute this. I keep on forgetting I can mute the computer when I don't have a guest. But there's no way to turn the text things from coming on. It goes, it doesn't ring on my phone. Just making noise. It's very frustrating. And people only text me during shows. It's kind of weird how that works. I think that people are underestimating Brian Hartline versus Wink Martindale. Brian Hartline does have a lot more weapons to work with in general. Second year as offensive coordinator with a year removed where they had Chip Kelly in there. And, I was texting with Steve yesterday and he's like, well, how much is Brian Hartline going to end? How long does it take? If not immediately, does Ryan Day start calling plays? Well, that hasn't worked for them either. Right. In the last, outside of 2019, that hasn't worked for them. So I think that the offensive coordinator versus Wink Martindale is an interesting battle. Could it end up being a USC-Michigan scenario? Maybe. Absolutely. And I spent forever trying to figure out what stats I wanted to look up and just kind of figured it out again. I think that is, that's the game. Essentially. Now, we say that, and I feel like most years that we feel like something is going to happen a certain way, it goes a different direction. Outside of last year, when I kind of, on the drive down to Columbus episode that we did, I kind of nailed everything that happened in the game in terms of hey, if Michigan's going to win, here's the path. This is a little bit different because there's multiple paths. I do think that the biggest key here is Wink Martindale versus Brian Hartline. And you just kind of hear, I've seen a lot of, again, the hubris, and it comes not just from the Ohio State team, the media, national media, but, even their, or how did I want to phrase that? It just comes in general, even from the national media, and just this idea Ohio State's got another gear they haven't shown, and Michigan's not afforded the same luxury. And I understand that they haven't exactly shown a lot of inspiring performances throughout the year either. But generally, you kind of get this Ohio State, they've got this up their sleeve. They got this up their sleeve. Michigan tends to not have that. Right. But I do feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like there is a much more stress of importance put on this game by Wink Martindale and the players than the trip to USC, number one. Not saying Michigan can't get got, not saying that Ohio State couldn't have found the salve that kind of is their elixir to kind of get over everything that the problems they've had offensively intermittently in this rivalry. But that's part of it. But I also think on the same token, I think Matt Patricia is getting essentially his correct due, considering how he's done so far this year. But I think people are overlooking what Michigan is capable of offensively. And here's a couple of things that I looked at here. You look at last year versus this year. Michigan only had 2 games last year with 200 or more passing yards. They've got 7 this year. They had only 6 games rushing for 150 or more last year with 3 games over 200 yards. And they've got 9 150 plus rushing games this year and 7 over 200. I understand Ohio State's number 1 in everything. That was the case in 2019 as well. And Michigan was able to do a lot of things offensively. That's where the throw the records out the window type of thing kind of happens often in this game. Michigan's offense, it's funny because I watched some things where some Ohio State media said Michigan's not a threat to pass the ball. Now, they've had a couple games where that's been the case, and one at home, Purdue. But, that was the worst passing performance Bryce Underwood's had in his career so far. And yeah, you could certainly say, oh, well, Ohio State's better than Purdue. That's true. But, Northwestern had a better passing offense than Purdue. Michigan went on the road and Bryce Underwood made mistakes, yes, but also threw for almost 300 yards in that game. So the Michigan offense, for as much as people act like it's an also ran, it is ranked, I think, like 20-ish spots below Ohio State, but it's only averaging 20 yards fewer per game than Ohio State's is, and only 10 in the month of November. So I can't get off the idea that the team that wins the rushing battle wins this game and has since the 2001 season forward. And I'd be interested. There's not really very good, easy ways to look up stats from before then. I would imagine that was probably the case for a big stretch outside of just the 1 year in 2000 when the team that didn't win the rushing battle won. Nonetheless, Ohio State, I mean, their rushing battle, I mean, they look relatively similar to last year statistically. Obviously, I think you'd rather have Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins compared to what they've got now. Maybe Bo Jackson and CJ Donaldson and Isaiah West and James Peoples end up being exactly what they need. Maybe they're being overlooked, but I mean, Michigan's primary defensive edict is to build a run wall and stop the run. And they are very good at doing so. This is the second best rushing defense that they'll have faced, not by a wide margin. And the best, Texas, they did not perform well against Texas. But still, I mean, Ohio State has 6 games rushing for more than 150 yards, 4 over 200. And 2 of those did come against 2 of the worst rushing defenses in the country. The other 2 were Ohio and Grambling State. So take that for what it's worth. Last year was 8-3 by the same metrics. This year they've got only 3 games passing under 200 yards and 2 more under 220. Last year, only 1 game over 300 before Texas in the Cotton Bowl. And that was Oregon. This year, they've only got 1 as well, and it was to Texas. Illinois was just 5 short with 295 in terms of total yards, that is. The most passing yards they've given up, they've only given up over 200 yards once this season, 248 to Illinois, and they've only given up 1 triple-digit rushing game, and that was to Texas, who had 166. Texas did win the rushing battle in that game and lost by a touchdown. So finishing is obviously a big part of it. I think you're going to see, if I was to pick a surprise in this game, I still think Michigan will win the rushing battle. I think Michigan's going to pass for a lot more than pretty much anyone predicting in this game believes. Now, the question is more so, I think, does Michigan finish? Ohio State's got the best red zone defense in the country, I believe. They're very, very good. You know, you watch that Washington game. Washington had no problem getting deep into the green zone or even into the red zone before it stalled out. So it kind of seemed like it psyched itself out. A lot of times they'd get like, and either in that fringe or right up there, and then they'd have like a penalty and be facing first or second and long, and then it would stall out, and either they turned the ball over on downs, if memory serves, or had to kick one of their 2 field goals, all of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think that the big surprise, because I think Ohio State is going to recognize, hey, we got to stop the run, and they're going to do everything they can to do that. I think Michigan will still be able to get some yards on the ground. It might not be as pretty as it was, say, the last couple weeks. I think they'll break one, relatively big one, and maybe this looks a little bit like the Alabama game last year. I think that's, you have to keep in mind that for all the talk of like, oh, no Mason, no Kenneth, I think that Alabama had a better offensive line than Ohio State currently does. And I think that, obviously Michigan's playing that same personnel. Michigan seems to be that type of team in the last couple of years that rises to an occasion for this game or, that Alabama game in the bowl game that other teams don't. Previous Michigan teams don't. Michigan has tended to play Ohio State better than it does other teams on the schedule anyway, minus 2018 and 2019. I just don't think people are looking at it that way. And I think that the preparation, the year-long preparation, you listen to Jack and the things he said. I mean, he kind of elucidated on some things that go beyond kind of what we had heard about the year-long preparation. And I think that they just tend to be more ready for this. And I know that it's not a sexy thing to look at and say like Demeanor want to, the year-long preparation, how much does that matter? Because it does not. Again, Ryan Day seems like he's kind of more in the old school Jim Harbaugh camp of, it's just the other game on the schedule. Maybe he's obfuscating. I don't know. But I think that there's something to be said about that. And this game being at home, I can't remember what the stat was that I was going to look up. But I think it was Ohio State's offense. Is that what it was? Passing offense. I looked up something and I was like, whoa, I can't remember what it is offhand now. I mean, they're in road games, they're 28th in passing offense. In home games, they're 31st. So I guess that's not what it was. There was some stat and I looked at it when I was still in bed this morning and I can't remember what it was. That was like, okay, that's kind of glaring. 37th on the road in total offense compared to 31st. So I guess it's negligible. So I can't remember what the actual thing was that I was looking at. No, nonetheless, I just think that the demeanor, this idea of, this is our birthright. We're frustrated. Like Ohio State's frustrated, but like as if like Michigan doesn't like still have the same desire to beat the Buckeyes, especially with all of this talk, especially with Ohio State having won the national championship. Michigan's got everything on the line. I think all the pressure is on Ohio State though. And I think that's going to play a difference. Let's finish out the preview and get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, the holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. Listen, the quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. And the variety is underrated. Steaks, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. It's one of those gifts that truly fits anyone. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. I really wish I could remember what the stat was that I looked up in bed. It's going to be killing me. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting. I need to talk. Like, that was the whole point of like talking about stats in second segment. And then I can't find the one that I wanted to find. Interesting that. All right. So what's going to happen? I'll say this, whatever I think is going to happen, probably will be the opposite. That's kind of how I feel about this game. I did have a dream last night that Michigan lost the game. Kind of has me feel a little bit edgy as far as making predictions. And I understand it's just a dream. I have dreams about things that don't happen pretty much every single night. So there's that. I do think that Michigan's being a little bit overlooked by Ohio State. And I know that sounds weird because it's like, oh, it's the game. They crossed out all the M's, all this stuff. Ryan Day, like, I think that the narrative of Ryan Day has a different look in his eye and all of that. I just don't think any of that like really matters. Ultimately, I think it's how you prepare. And I think Michigan will ultimately be more prepared in some ways. Now, again, that doesn't mean Michigan's going to execute. That's the big thing. Michigan has to execute. It needs to finish, right? Like I say almost every year, Michigan can't afford any turnovers. Well, they turned the ball over last year. They turned the ball over. They didn't in 2023. Don't think they did in 22, but they did in 21. So it's kind of like, that always just happens. And as much as I sit there and say like, yeah, they got to play perfect and all of this, they haven't played perfect in any of these games, really. as much as you can sit there and say like, yeah, they're going to have to, they have to score first and they have to do that. Like they didn't do that in 2022 in Columbus, after Brian Hartline had his, like, again, foregone conclusion speech before. And Michigan had a halftime deficit and won that game. Game was tied at halftime last year. Michigan won that game. This game is at home. I think that can play a difference. Ohio State's played in some tough road venues this year, mostly going on the way to Washington and breaking their long-standing home streak. I just think, though, Washington, it was obvious to me that both Ohio State and Michigan were probably going to do well against them. I just think their lines are undersized. I thought they were going to get pushed around. They didn't fully get pushed around on offense, but they couldn't finish. Like I said, they had a lot of self-inflicted wounds in that game. Michigan can't afford a lot of self-inflicted wounds in this game. Right? Like, obviously can't play the way you did against Northwestern. You'll get destroyed. You turn the ball over once, maybe twice, but you better have turned them over twice too, if that's the case. And you better hope that you didn't do it like in the shadow of your own end zone type of thing. I do think that Michigan will end up winning the line of scrimmage on both sides. Julian Sand has only been sacked 3 times this year. That was the case for Malik Washington last week, and Michigan managed. One of the stats here that I wanted to bring up is Derek Moore sitting at 9.5 sacks. For anyone who sits and says, oh, well, they didn't, 2021, everyone could see that part of that was coming because you had Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo. Aiden Hutchinson had 10 sacks going into the game. Derek Moore has 9.5. Now, true, Michigan doesn't have a David Ajabo on the other side, but Michigan's actually trending to have more sacks from the rest of the field than it did that year. So, because Michigan doesn't really have, like, Jayshawn Barham, yes, but it seems like, and this could be a Jayshawn Barham game, we'll see. But I think that they've done a really good job with the rest of the field. You've got linebackers getting sacks more. They're not as stout in the middle, but that was the same case in 2021. This game has a lot of 2021 feel to me. With the exception of, I think Michigan was given a little bit more of a chance because I think it was ranked like 5th or something like that in the country than they're being given at the moment. And I think that can play with the psychology of both teams. And if Michigan is more prepared and Michigan has a good game plan, then yes, I think Michigan can emerge. Again, I can't get over the idea of the rushing battle. If I had to trust one team to stop the run and run for more, it would be Michigan. Now, Michigan's only really been kind of stopped once, but they don't have any games under 100 yards rushing on the year. And the only time they were really stopped was USC. And that was the one time that they really got put into a blender in terms of rush defense. They just couldn't stop King Miller, but like the whole defense played terribly in that game. Like there was no redeeming qualities in that game. That could be the case this week. I don't think it will be, though. And yeah, we're not going fully based on stats here. We're going kind of off vibes to some degree because vibes have in some ways determined what's happened. Now, I don't know if I made a pick in 2021. I think I technically picked Ohio State, but I was like, but I have a sense of brimming confidence going into that game. 2022, I think I picked Michigan. 2023, I definitely picked Michigan. Last year, I obviously didn't. I've had this stance for some time that until Ohio State wins and they flip the switch again, I can't pick against Michigan. So with that in mind and the rushing battle, like who do I trust more to run the football? I think both are probably relatively equally capable at stopping the run. But I think Michigan is more dependable at running the football. And I just think that people are overlooking what the pass game has started to do and really kind of has done all year outside of, it wasn't pretty at Nebraska. It wasn't pretty, obviously. At USC was kind of fine yardage-wise, but they couldn't finish in that game. Called some really weird plays and things of that nature. Wasn't pretty at Michigan State, right? But the last 2 road games. What have I talked about? Building to this game. I understand Ohio State has been more consistent, more dominant. That's been kind of the case for the majority of the last 4 years as well. They have tended to be more consistent and more dominant, 2023 aside. That was probably the only time that they haven't been. So with that, I'm taking Michigan. And I'm going to say that whatever I think is going to happen, it's probably going to not happen. It's going to go a different way, but I'm still picking Michigan. And when I say what I think is going to happen, like if I sit there and say like, yeah, the run game is going to win the game for Michigan, I feel like then, okay, Bryce Underwood or Michigan will be the one that wins without winning the rushing battle in some weird twist. But I still feel like Ohio State and Ryan Day has a Michigan problem. I don't think that's going to go away based off of the way they're talking about it. And I think maybe this time you'll see him be a little too aggressive. So barring Michigan mistakes, execution issues, turnovers, Michigan to win the game, I'm going to go with the score of, I know this is a lot more than Ohio State's given up all year, but so was in 2019. I know it's a different team, different coaches, all that stuff. Michigan with 27 points, that was more than Ohio State, I think, had given up to that point in the year. I think. I'm not 100 on that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. I'm going to look it up real quick. We got time. 27. Yeah, that was the most they gave up all year until they lost to Clemson. Now, yeah, they gave it 21 to FAU, but otherwise, like and 21 to Rutgers, weirdly, but otherwise they had never given up more than 17. And I know they're better than that this year. I just think Michigan's got a plan. I based off of everything I've heard, everything I've kind of seen, I feel like Michigan's prime for this. So I'll give me Michigan 24, Ohio State 20. That's where we're at. All right, that's going to do it for us today. The plan is the manifesto tomorrow. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Really wanted to end it. I'm just going to end it this way because I want to. So on that terrible disappointment, I can't remember exactly what Jeremy Clarkson says, so never mind. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.